This is Mr. B reads J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and we're going to start with the incredible work of The Fellowship of the Ring, arguably one of the best books ever written. This story series is aimed at our older children in years 4, 5 and 6, and we're going to enjoy listening with it to the incredible soundtrack from the films, the music of Howard Shore. So sit back and enjoy the wonderful work and music of Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring, Book 2, Chapter 7, The Mirror of Galadriel. The sun was sinking behind the mountains and the shadows were deepening in the woods when they went on again. The paths now went into thickets where the dusk had already gathered. Night came beneath the trees as they walked, and the elves uncovered their silver lamps. Suddenly they came out into the open again and found themselves under a pale evening sky pricked by a few early stars. There was a wide treeless space before them, running in a great circle and bending away on either hand. Beyond it was a deep foss lost in soft shadow, but the grass upon its brink was green as if it glowed still in memory of the sun that had gone. Upon the further side there rose to a great height a green wall encircling a green hill covered with malon trees taller than they had ever seen in all the land. Their height could not be guessed, but they stood up in the twilight like living towers. In their many-tiered branches and amid their ever-moving leaves, countless lights were gleaming, green and gold and silver. Haldir turned towards the company. "Welcome to Caras Galadorn," he said. "Here is the city of the Galadrim, where dwell the Lord Celeborn and Galadriel, the Lady of Lorien." They came to a white bridge and crossing found the great gates of the city. They faced southwest, set between the ends of the encircling wall that here overlapped, and they were tall and strong and hung with many lamps. Haldir knocked and spoke, and the gates opened soundlessly, but of guards Frodo could see no sign. The travellers passed within, and the gates shut behind them. They were in a deep lane, and they passed quickly through it into the city of the trees. No folk could they see, nor hear any feet upon the paths, but there were many voices about them, and in the air above. Far away up on the hill they could hear the sound of singing falling from on high like soft rain upon leaves. They went along many paths and climbed many stairs until they came to the high places, and saw before them amid a wide lawn a fountain shimmering. It was lit by silver lamps that swung from the boughs of trees, and it fell into a basin of silver from which a white stream spilled. Upon the south side of the lawn there stood the mightiest of all the trees. Its great smooth bole gleamed like grey silk, and up it towered until its first branches far above opened their huge limbs under shadowy clouds of leaves. Beside it a broad white ladder stood, and at its foot 3 elves were seated. They sprang up as the travellers approached, and Frodo saw that they were tall and clad in grey mail, and from their shoulders hung long white cloaks. "Here dwell Celeborn and Galadriel," said Haldir. "It is their wish that you should ascend and speak with them." One of the elf wardens then blew a clear note on a small horn, and it was answered 3 times from far above. "I will go first," said Haldir. "Let Frodo come next, and with him Legolas. The others may follow as they wish. It is a long climb for those that are not used to such stairs, but you may rest upon the way." As he climbed up slowly, Frodo passed many flats, some on one side, some on the other, and some about the bole of the tree, so that the ladder passed through them. At a great height above the ground he came to a wide talon, like the deck of a great ship. On it was built a house, so large that almost it would have served for a hall of men upon the earth. He entered behind Haldir and found that he was in a chamber of oval shape, in the midst of which grew the tree of the great malorn, now tapering towards its crown, and yet making still a pillar of wide girth. The chamber was filled with a soft light. Its walls were green and silver, and its roof of gold. Many elves were seated there. On 2 chairs beneath the bole of the tree, and canopied by a living bough, there sat, side by side, Celeborn and Galadriel. They stood up to greet their guests. Very tall they were, and the lady no less tall than the lord, and they were grave and beautiful. They were clad wholly in white, and the hair of the lady was of deep gold, and the hair of Lord Celeborn was of silver, long and bright. But no sign of age was upon them, unless it was in the depths of their eyes, for these were keen as lances in the starlight, and yet profound, the wells of deep memory. Haldir led Frodo before them, and the Lord welcomed him in his own tongue. The Lady Galadriel said no word, but looked long upon his face. "Sit now beside my chair, Frodo of the Shire," said Celeborn. "When all have come, we will speak together." Each of the companions he greeted courteously by name as they entered. "Welcome, Aragorn, son of Arathorn," he said. "It is 38 years of the world outside since you came to this land, and those years lie heavy on you. Here lay aside your burden for a while. Welcome, Gimli, son of Gloin. 'Tis long indeed since we saw one of Durin's folk in Caras Galadorn. But today we have broken our long law. May it be a sign that though the world is now dark, better days are at hand, and that friendship shall be renewed between our peoples." Gimli bowed low. When all the guests were seated, the Lord looked at them again. "Here are 8, he said. 9 were to set out, so said the messengers. But maybe there had been some change of counsel that we have not heard. Elrond is far away, and darkness gathers between us, and all this year the shadows have grown longer." "Nay, there was no change of counsel," said the Lady Galadriel, speaking for the first time. Her voice was clear and musical, but deeper than woman's wont. "Gandalf the Grey set out with the company, but he did not pass the borders of this land. Now tell us where he is, for I much desire to speak with him again, but I cannot see him from afar. A grey mist is about him, and the ways of his feet and of his mind are hidden from me." "Alas," said Aragorn, "Gandalf the Grey fell into shadow. He remained in Moria and did not escape." At these words all the elves in the hall cried aloud in grief and amazement. "These are evil tidings," said Celeborn. He turned to Haldir. "Why has nothing of this been told to me before?" he asked in the elven tongue. "We have not spoken to Haldir of our deeds or our purpose," said Legolas. "At first we were weary, and danger was too close behind, and afterwards we almost forgot our grief for a time, as we walked in gladness on the fair paths of Lorien." "Yet our grief is great, and our loss cannot be mended," said Frodo. "Gandalf was our guide, and he led us through Moria, and when our escape seemed beyond hope, he saved us, and he fell." "Tell us now the full tale," said Celeborn. Then Aragorn recounted all that had happened upon the pass of Caradhras, and in the days that followed, and he spoke of Balin and his book, and the fight at the chamber of Mozzabul, and the fire, and the narrow bridge, and the coming of the terror. Afterwards there was a silence. At length Celeborn spoke again. "I will do what I can to aid you now, each according to his wish and need, but especially the one of the little folk who bears the burden." "Your quest is known to us," said Galadriel, looking at Frodo, "but we will not speak of it more openly. Yet not in vain will it prove, maybe, that you came to this land seeking aid, as Gandalf himself plainly purposed, for the Lord of the Galadrim is accounted the wisest of the elves of Middle-earth, and a giver of gifts beyond the power of kings." The Lady Galadriel smiled. "Do not let your hearts be troubled," she said. "Tonight you shall sleep in peace." Then they sighed and felt suddenly weary, as those who have been questioned long and deeply, though no words had been spoken openly. "Go now," said Celeborn. "You are worn with sorrow and much toil. Even if your quest did not concern us closely, you should have refuge in this city until you were healed and refreshed. Now you shall rest, and we will not speak of your further road for a while." That night the company slept upon the ground, much to the satisfaction of the hobbits. The elves spread for them a pavilion among the trees near the fountain, and in it they laid soft couches. Then, speaking words of peace with fair elvish voices, they left them. For a little while the travellers talked about their night in the treetops, and of their day's journey, and of the Lord and the Lady, for they did not yet have the heart to look further back. They remained for some days in Lothlorien, so far as they could tell or remember. All the while that they dwelt there the sun shone clear, save for a gentle rain that fell at times and passed away, leaving all things fresh and clean. The air was cool and soft, as if it were early spring, yet they felt about them the deep and thoughtful quiet of winter. It seemed to them that they did little but eat and drink and rest and walk among the trees, and it was enough. They had not seen the Lord and Lady again, and they had little speech with the elven folk, for few of those knew or would use the western tongue. Haldir had bidden them farewell, and had gone back to the borders of the north, where great watch was now kept since the tidings of Moria that the company had brought. Legolas was away much among the other elves, and after the first night he did not sleep with the other companions, though he returned to talk and eat with them. Often he took Gimli out with him across the land, and the others wondered at this change. Now as the companions sat or walked together they spoke of Gandalf, and all that each had known and seen of him came clear before their minds. As they were healed of hurt and weariness of body, the grief of their loss grew more keen. Often they heard nearby elvish voices singing, and knew that they were making songs of lamentation for his fall, for they caught his name among the sweet, sad words that they could not understand. One evening Frodo and Sam were walking together in the cool twilight. Both of them felt restless again. On Frodo suddenly the shadow of parting had fallen. He knew somehow that the time was very near when he must leave Lothlorien. "What do you think of the elves now, Sam?" he said. "I asked you the same question once before. It seems a very long while ago, but you have seen more of them since then." "I have indeed," said Sam, "and I reckon there's elves and elves. They're all elvish enough, but they're not all the same. Now these folk aren't wanderers or homeless. They seem a bit nearer to the likes of us. They seem to belong here, more even than hobbits do in the Shire. Whether they've made this land or the land's made them, it's hard to say, if you take my meaning. It's wonderfully quiet here. Nothing seems to be going on, and nobody seems to want it to. If there's any magic about it, it's right down deep where I can't lay my hands on it, in a manner of speaking." "You can see it and feel it everywhere," said Frodo. "Well," said Sam, "you can't see anybody working it. No fireworks like poor Gandalf used to show. I wonder we don't see nothing of the Lord and Lady in all these days. I fancy now that she could do some wonderful things if she had a mind. I'd dearly love to see some elf magic, Mr. Frodo." "I wouldn't," said Frodo. "I am content, and I don't miss Gandalf's fireworks, but his big bushy eyebrows and his quick temper and his voice."
"You're right," said Sam, "and don't think I'm finding fault, but I've never heard of a land better than this. It's like being at home and on holiday at the same time, if you understand me. I don't want to leave. All the same, I'm beginning to feel that if we've got to go on, then we'd best get on with it." "I'm afraid that's only too true, Sam," said Frodo, "yet I hope very much that before we leave we shall see the Lady of the Elves again." Even as he spoke, they saw, as if she came in answer to their words, the Lady Galadriel approaching. Tall and white and fair, she walked beneath the trees. She spoke no word, but beckoned to them. Turning aside, she led them toward the southern slopes of the hill, and passing through a high green hedge they came into an enclosed garden. No trees grew there, and it lay open to the sky. The evening star had risen, and was shining with white fire above the western woods. Down a long flight of steps the lady went into the deep green hollow, through which ran murmuring the silver stream that issued from the fountain of the hill. At the bottom, upon a low pedestal carved like a branching tree, stood a basin of silver, wide and shallow, and beside it stood a silver urn. With water from the stream, Galadriel filled the basin to the brim and breathed on it, and when the water was still again, she spoke. "Here is the mirror of Galadriel," she said. "I have brought you here so that you may look into it, if you will." The air was very still, and the dell was dark, and the elf lady beside him was tall and pale. "What shall we look for, and what shall we see?" asked Frodo, filled with awe. "Many things I can command the mirror to reveal," she answered, "and to some I can show what they desire to see. But the mirror will also show things unbidden, and those are often stranger and more profitable than things which we wish to behold. What you will see if you leave the mirror free to work I cannot tell, for it shows things that were, and things that are, and things that may yet be. But which it is that he sees, even the wisest cannot always tell. Do you wish to look?" Frodo did not answer. "And you," she said, turning to Sam, "for this is what your folk would call magic, I believe. This, if you will, is the magic of Galadriel. Did you not say that you wished to see elf magic?" "I did," said Sam, trembling a little between fear and curiosity. "I'll have a peep, lady, if you're willing. And I'd not mind a glimpse of what's going on at home," he said. "It seems a terrible long time since I've been away. But there, like as not, I'll only see the stars or something that I won't understand." "Like as not," said the lady, with a gentle laugh. "But come, you shall look and see what you may. Do not touch the water." Sam climbed up on the foot of the pedestal and leaned over the basin. The water looked hard and dark. Stars were reflected in it. "There's only stars, as I thought," he said. Then he gave a low gasp, for the stars went out as if a dark veil had been withdrawn. The mirror grew grey and then clear. There was sun shining, and the branches of the trees were waving and tossing in the wind. But before Sam could make up his mind what it was that he saw, the light faded, and now he thought he saw Frodo with a pale face lying fast asleep under a grey dark cliff. Then he seemed to see himself going along a dim passage and climbing an endless winding stair. It came to him suddenly that he was looking urgently for something, and what it was he didn't know. Like a dream the vision shifted and went back again, and he saw the trees again. But this time they were not so close, and he could see what was going on. They were not waving in the wind, they were falling, crashing to the ground. "Hi!" cried Sam in an outraged voice. "There's that Ted Sandyman cutting down trees as he shouldn't. They didn't ought to be felled. It's that avenue beyond the mill that shades the road to Bywater. I wish I could get at Ted and I'd fell him." But now Sam noticed that the old mill had vanished, and a large red brick building was being put up where it had stood. Lots of folk were busy at work. There was a tall red chimney nearby. Black smoke seemed to cloud the surface of the mirror. "There's some devilry at work in the Shire," he said. Elrond knew what he was about when he wanted to send Mr. Merry back. Then suddenly Sam gave a cry and sprang away. "I can't stay here," he said wildly. "I must go home. They've dug up Bagshot Row, and there's the old gaffer going down the hill with his bits of things on a barrow. I must go home." "You cannot go home alone," said the lady. "You did not wish to go home without your master before you looked in the mirror. And yet you knew that evil things might well be happening in the Shire. Remember that the mirror shows many things, and not all have yet come to pass. Some never come to be, unless those that behold the visions turn aside from their path to prevent them. The mirror is dangerous as a guide of deeds." Sam sat down on the ground and put his head in his hands. "I wish I had never come here. I don't want to see any more magic," he said, and fell silent. After a moment he spoke again thickly, as if struggling with tears. "No, I'll go home by the long road with Mr. Frodo, or not at all," he said. "But I hope I can get back some day. If what I've seen turns out true, somebody's going to catch it hot." "Do you now wish to look, Frodo?" said the Lady Galadriel. "You did not wish to see elf magic, and were content." "Do you advise me to look?" asked Frodo. "No," she said. "I do not counsel you one way or another. I am not a counsellor. You may learn something. It may be profitable, and yet it may not. Seeing is both good and perilous. Yet I think, Frodo, that you have the courage and wisdom enough for the venture, or I would not have brought you here. Do as you will." "I will look," said Frodo, and he climbed on the pedestal and bent over the dark water. At once the mirror cleared, and he saw a twilit land. Mountains loomed dark in the distance against a pale sky. A long grey road wound back out of sight. Far away, a figure came slowly down the road. faint and small at first, but growing larger and clearer as it approached. Suddenly Frodo realised that it reminded him of Gandalf. He almost called aloud the wizard's name, and then he saw that the figure was clothed, not in grey but in a white that shone faintly in the dusk, and in its hands there was a white staff. The head was so bowed that he could see no face, and presently the figure turned aside round a bend in the road and went out of the mirror's view. Doubt came into Frodo's mind. Was this a vision of Gandalf on one of his many lonely journeys long ago, or was it Saruman? The vision now changed, brief and small but very vivid. He caught a glimpse of Bilbo walking restlessly about his room. The table was littered with disordered papers. Rain was beating on the windows. Then there was a pause, and after it many swift scenes followed that Frodo in some ways knew to be parts of a great history in which he had become involved. The mist cleared, and he saw a sight which he had never seen before, but he knew at once: the sea. But suddenly the mirror went dark altogether, as dark as if a hole had opened in the world of sight, and Frodo looked into emptiness. In the black abyss there appeared a single eye that grew slowly, until it filled nearly all the mirror. So terrible was it that Frodo stood rooted, unable to cry out or withdraw his gaze. The eye was rimmed with fire, but was itself glazed yellow as a cat's, watchful and intent, and the black slit of its pupil opened on a pit, a window into nothing. Then the eye began to rove, searching this way and that, and Frodo knew with certainty and horror that among the many things that it sought, he himself was one. But he also knew that it could not see him. Not yet, not unless he willed it. The ring that hung upon its chain about his neck grew heavy, heavier than a great stone, and his head was dragged downwards. The mirror seemed to be growing hot, and curls of steam were rising from the water. He was slipping forward. "Do not touch the water," said the Lady Galadriel softly. The vision faded, and Frodo found that he was looking at the cool stars twinkling in the silver basin. He stepped back, shaking all over, and looked at the lady. "I know what it was that you last saw," she said, "for that is also in my mind. Do not be afraid, but do not think that staying here among the trees in this land of Lothlorien you are defended against the enemy. I say to you, Frodo, that even as I speak to you, I perceive the Dark Lord and know his mind, or all of his mind that concerns the elves, and he gropes ever to see me and my thought, but still the door is closed." She lifted up her white arms and spread out her hands towards the east in a gesture of rejection and denial. Evandel, the evening star, most beloved of the elves, shone clear above. So bright was it that the figure of the elven lady cast a dim shadow on the ground. Its rays glanced upon a ring upon her finger, glittered like polished gold, overlaid with silver light, and a white stone in it twinkled, as if the even star had come down to rest upon her hand. Frodo gazed at the ring with awe, for suddenly it seemed to him that he understood. "Yes," she said, divining his thought, "it is not permitted to speak of it, and Elrond could not do so, but it cannot be hidden from the ring-bearer, and one who has seen the eye. Verily it is in the land of Lorien, upon the finger of Galadriel, that one of the three remains. This is Nenya, the ring of adamant, and I am its keeper." He suspects, but he does not know, not yet. Do not now see, therefore, how the coming of you to us is but the footstep of doom to our people. For if you fail, then we are laid bare to the enemy. Yet if you succeed, then our power is diminished, and Lothlorien will fade, and the tides of time will sweep it away. We must depart into the west, or dwindle to a rustic folk of dell and cave, slowly to forget and to be forgotten. Frodo bent his head. "And what do you wish?" he said at last. "That what shall be, she answered. "The love of the elves for their land and their works is deeper than the deeps of the sea, and their regret is undying and cannot ever wholly be assuaged. Yet they will cast all away rather than submit to Sauron. For the fate of Lothlorien you are not answerable, but only for the doing of your own task. Yet I could wish, were it of any avail, that the one ring had never been wrought, or had remained for ever lost." "You are wise and fearless and fair, Lady Galadriel," said Frodo. "I will give you the one ring if you ask for it. It is too great a matter for me." Galadriel laughed with a sudden clear laugh. "Wise the Lady of Galadriel may be," she said, "yet here she has met her match in courtesy. You begin to see with a keen eye. I do not deny that my heart has greatly desired to ask what you offer. For many long years I have pondered what I might do should the great ring come into my hands, and behold, it was brought within my grasp. The evil that was devised long ago works on it many ways, whether Sauron himself stands or falls. Would not that have been a noble deed to set in the credit of his ring, if I had taken it by force or fear from my guest? And now at last it comes. You will give me the ring freely. In place of the Dark Lord you will set up a queen, and I shall not be dark, but beautiful and terrible as the morning and the night. Fair as the sea and the sun, and the snow upon the mountain. Dreadful as the storm and the lightning, stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love me in despair." She lifted up her hand, and from the ring that she wore there issued a great light that illuminated her alone, and left all else dark. She stood before Frodo, seeming now tall beyond measurement, and beautiful beyond enduring, terrible and worshipful. Then she let her hand fall, and the light faded, and suddenly she laughed again, and lo, she was shrunken, a slender elf woman clad in simple white, whose gentle voice was soft and sad. I passed the test, she said. I will diminish and go into the west, and remain Galadriel. Thank you, Frodo. I will not take the ring. They stood for a while in silence. At length the lady spoke again. Let us return, she said. In the morning you must depart, for now we have chosen, and the tides of fate are flowing. I would ask one thing before we go, said Frodo, a thing which I often meant to ask Gandalf in Rivendell. I am permitted to wear the One Ring. Why cannot I see all the others, and know the thoughts of those that wear them? You have not tried, she said. Only thrice have you set the ring upon your finger, since you knew what you possessed. Do not try. It would destroy you. Before you could use the power, you would need to become far stronger, and to train your will to the domination of others. Yet even so, as ring-bearer, and as one that has borne it on finger, and seen that which is hidden, your sight has grown keener. You have perceived my thought more clearly than many that are accounted wise. You saw the eye of him that holds the 7 and the 9. And did you not see and recognise the ring upon my finger? Did you see my ring, she asked, turning again to Sam. No, lady, he answered. To tell you the truth, I wondered what you were talking about. But if you'll pardon my speaking out, I think my master was right. I wish you'd take his ring. You'd put things to rights. You'd stop them digging up the gaffer and turning him adrift. You'd make some folk pay for their dirty work. I would, she said. That is how it would all begin. But then it would not stop with that, alas. We will speak of it no more. Let us go.